Weaponry, accoutrements, print material, and personal effects all help bring the era to life. A display of toys and games were evidence of the wide appeal to children as well as adults. Knowledgeable tour guides helped broaden our understanding of life during the First Modern War. School groups crowded into the old church on appropriately named Andersonville Road to view the exhibit and attend a presentation by a very important American of the 19th century.
As we come in the door, you notice the American flag. Did anybody notice how many stars are on that flag? How many? Wait, you only have 50 states? 36. Why would there be 36? That's right, because there were 36 states. In those days, you didn't have flag factories. Everything was hand-stitched and handmade. So you look at the Confederate flag over there and this flag, they're handmade. Very quickly about the flag, that was the standard American flag. There was no other American flag. That was the, it was the standard flag that we're used to. There were regimental flags and things like that. The Confederates had actually 2 or 3 flags. The Confederate first flag was a small version of this in the upper right-hand corner where the stars went, and then they had 3 red and white stripes coming down the flag. But what would happen when that flag hung from a pole or a standard, it looked a lot like the American flag. So troops in the middle of battle would rally around the flag. Well, frequently, the Union troops would rally around the Confederate flag and vice versa. So a lot of guys got shot by the wrong side. There was another thing about uniforms. In the early part of the war, uniforms were not standard blue and gray. So they had green, they had red, there was a New York unit called Zubas, which wore big balloon pants and French uniforms, and there was a Zuba unit in the South. They looked identical. When they went into battle, nobody knew who was on which side, so frequently a lot of soldiers were killed by their own people. Eventually, after the first 2 years of the war, standard gray and standard blue were adopted by both sides as an identifying color. This first uniform jacket, you see, has a bit of a tail on it. Those tails, and I don't know if you can see, these are left over from the American Revolution, where frock tails were still worn on coats, and that was a kind of style then. What they found is that got in the way, so early on in the war the tails were cut off, and many of your jackets became waist jackets. They were much easier to work in. Yeah, this is a cavalry jacket, and on that cavalry jacket you'll notice these epaulets. Now most of these guards and epaulets were made out of cloth, and they were signified rank, and they were soft cloth. Now these would be gold braids, but they were not very protective. These are steel, and there's a reason for that. Because when you're in the cavalry, as you attack someone on a horse, you slash down like that, or like that, and you slashed across the collarbone. That was the killing blow. This was designed to protect that soldier from that. So if you slashed, you hit that shoulder plate. So that was his protection. It was kind of like a little bit of armor. Now, when we talk about cannons, one of the biggest things in the war was the cannon. It was used by both sides very effectively. This is a 12-pound shot. This weighs 12 pounds. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's concentrated weight. This is solid shot. This was shot at you through the mouth of this cannon. This had a range of about 500 yards or more, sometimes even more. It was very deadly. This was solid, so what it did is when it hit a tree, it knocked it over. When it hit a horse or a guy, it cut him in half. They had 3 types of shot. They used a solid shot, and there were things called canister and grape. Canister was a shot, looked like a big shotgun shell. You know what's inside of a shotgun shell? Little BB pellets. That's what canister was. There'd be about 20 or 30 little round balls about this big, and when the cannon exploded, all the balls went this way, hitting anybody around there. So they used a different type of shot for different things. The black powder was kept in here for your cannon, and would be poured in the muzzle. This is a tar bucket. Why would I need a tar bucket with a cannon? Anybody know? Cannons had wheels, wagons had wheels. They got rusty and dried out because of the weather, so you had to keep them greased all the time. It's also called a grease bucket. Over here, we have a standard field officer's desk. This is a portable desk. This would be shut, everything in here would be closed up, and this would go to the various units. On this desk, we have a variety of things. These are the personal items. Generally, privates, soldiers didn't have this. They had a knapsack. Everything they owned, they carried on their backs or in their pockets. Officers had things like this. They carried binoculars or spy glasses so they could see what the enemy was doing, scout their positions. They had writing utensils. They carried their toothbrush, silverware, knife, fork, and spoons, if you had the luxury of owning one. Things like that. Teacups. You probably know what these are. Reading glasses. These are reading glasses. Why is there a difference in these glasses? Sunglasses. There you go. Somebody said sunglasses. But you didn't know they had sunglasses in the Civil War. But not many soldiers had these. The only soldiers that wore these were the snipers. These are snipers' glasses. The reason is the outside of the glass was tinted and frosted, so all of you could see would be through these two little eye holes. That way I could see you, so if I was aiming at you, I could see you without all of these other kids in the way. That's what a sniper used to target his enemies. This was a lantern used during the Civil War. This is what you saw with no flashlights. But you had glass to keep the light from blowing out. Wine bottles, water bottles, ginger beer, bugle. We had someone play the bugle earlier. It still works. We have over here Civil War drum, which actually carried the Revolutionary War and handed down through a family through several generations. It was actually cut down to fit a smaller sized drum, because in the Revolutionary War there was about that much more drum to it. This canteen right here with a hole in it, how'd that hole get there? Not shot, bayonet. That rifle right up there with that tri-pound bayonet, that was the type of bayonet used. So that probably saved some guy's life, because the hole didn't come out the other side. Anybody over here Matthew Brady? Matthew Brady was a very famous photographer. Most of the pictures you see here of Civil War people were shot by Matthew Brady or some of his staff. So that's a picture that he shot, and that's a cadet's uniform from West Point. It's a West Point cadet's uniform from that time period. The man up here with the ribbons is Winfield Scott. He was a Grand Master of the Army when it started. We have on that wall next to you signatures of various soldiers and generals. On this far wall we also have some Ulysses S. Grant stuff, his personal memoirs, some of his books, some of his campaign buttons. What would he be campaigning for? Does anybody remember? He was the president. He was one of our presidents. So there are presidential buttons over there. Somebody asked me about this earlier. This is a standard issue rifle that was issued to the Army. This particular bayonet was a socket bayonet. Came off like this. It was favored by the Confederacy because it could be used as a sword as well. Unfortunately, they found out after about the first year of the war they didn't really need to fight with swords because these were so accurate and deadly. These things, this shot on this was accurate up to about 1,000 yards. 1,000 yards is a long way away. It means that I could peek out this window here and shoot somebody across the lake with this weapon. This was a very deadly weapon. During the Revolutionary War, the armies would line up and fire at each other, but if I shot a ball from here to that wall, it might hit 4 feet down because it was very inaccurate. The rifling of these barrels made these extremely accurate and deadly. During the Revolutionary War, more men were killed by bayonets than by guns because they weren't proven, they weren't reliable. During the Civil War, the bayonet rarely was used in combat. It was more of a defensive weapon. A lot of guys used it as a digging tool. When they needed a hole dug, they dug it with this. More people were killed with the long gun in the Civil War. Did anybody see the movie Gettysburg? Okay, did you remember Pickett's charge? Yeah. All right, to give you an idea of how deadly and accurate these weapons truly are, the initial launch of Pickett's charge, it was over 1 mile from the Confederate line to the Union stone wall. They walked. You saw in the movie how they walked up, very orderly. In less than 24 minutes, 15,000 men marched across that field. In less than 24 minutes, 7,500 of those men were dead from this weapon right here. And it was because several thousand Union people were shooting at it. It's a very heavy weapon. It was extremely accurate. It had a sight. Snipers had a very similar weapon, but they mounted a scope on the side. The gentleman in the picture has 2 signatures. One is written in right hand, and one is written in left hand. The one in the right hand was from a letter he wrote just before the war. During the war, he lost an arm. He lost his right arm. So after the war, he had to learn to write with his left hand. The signature is then in his left hand.
District art teachers encourage students to explore the historic and patriotic theme. Their resulting work shared gallery space with photos by Matthew Brady and prints by Currier and Ives. Crowning a week of related activities was a brilliant concert of Civil War-era music performed by Jay Unger and Molly Mason. Although it ended over 130 years ago, the Civil War continues to capture our imagination, thanks in part to the efforts of the Waterford Cultural Council.